Hey folks, my name is Dan Lapel for New Focus Recordings, and really excited to announce the release of FCR255 Patchwork, self-titled debut from the sax percussion duo. I've always had guitar in my mind, and I'm joined with Noa Even, saxophonist, and Stephen Klunk, percussionist. Hey guys, welcome. Good
Hey,
to see you.
thanks.
Hope you're
Thanks,
doing
Dan.
good. Hope everybody out in internet watching Zoom land is also doing well. Uh, so yeah, it's a great album. It's very rigorous stuff. I think it's really sort of vanguard pushing in terms of the aesthetic, and all the pieces are really beautifully, tightly conceived, and it was great to get to know it. Do you guys want to talk about like the project in general, the duo, the history of it, how this album came together before we jump into some excerpts?
Sure.
Noah?
Yeah, it's usually my spiel. Sure. So when I was doing my doctorate at Bowling Green State University, Stephen was doing his master's degree there, and I played on his final recital. We did this piece by Dennis DeSantis called Plus Eight, which is for saxophone and drum set.
I know this piece.
And then,
Cool.
yeah, so and Stephen was getting more into playing drum set, and he was in a metal band at the time, and hadn't really incorporated drum set into the classical percussion realm yet. And the next piece, we decided to play another sax and drum set piece, and that was Nucleus by Alex Minchik. And that piece just has so much depth, and we just loved exploring.
Yeah, I know that piece. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so we loved exploring just how the sounds interacted and what the potential of that piece was. And we thought that that would be a great basis for a duo, a saxophone and drum set specifically. And so that's kind of how we started. I think that was in 2013. So it's been a while. And then we
Cool.
started commissioning music because there isn't that much for sax and drum set.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I mean, you guys mentioned a little bit in your bio how the instrumentation itself sort of conjures these associations with different styles. And then when you actually listen to the music, like I feel like those stylistic references are really fragmented. So you hear them as sort of little sort of moments of, but it's not really like a sustained stylistic association, right? For the most
There,
part.
there are definitely pieces that have been written for us that are um, more sort of verbatim taken inspiration from other genres.
Yeah,
So these ones, not so much. These ones are more, like you said, on the kind of avant-garde end. But we do
right.
have a lot of pieces that are more or less straight up rock and metal.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. There was do you guys are you familiar with the Yes Around duo? I
Yes.
don't think they're really
Yeah,
active anymore, but they were doing a lot of stuff like in the early 2000s. That their workers union was like ridiculous. Um,
they did plus eight. That's I think that's kind of
oh,
how
right.
we came across that.
Yeah, cool. And do you want to give a shout? Was it Mark Bunce who did the recording on this? Mark's a
Yep.
great engineer who was at Bowling Green for years. Is he still there, or he retired or something?
He just recently retired, I believe,
Yeah,
in the
cool.
past couple of years.
Yeah, nice. And who was the designer on the album?
My brother, Isaac Klunk,
Sweet.
uh, did
As
the
you can
art.
see
Yeah.
behind me, looks really sweet. Do you guys know I taught at Bowling Green for a couple of years, like way back in the 18th century?
I think you, well, come on, but
I
I
did
think you
not
Uh,
know
mentioned
that.
that to me.
yeah. No. It's in like 1999 to 2001. So it's cool. Like, I don't know, whenever there's a Bowling Green project, associated project, I'm excited. And it happens a lot actually, because it's such a great new music school. So sweet. Should we listen to some music? Like, you guys want to set us up on an excerpt of the first piece on the album, Osnat Netzer's Zwang und Zweifel? You want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure. Um, us not kind of have a sort of long history with, in a way, when I was an undergrad, actually a sophomore in college, so like 2007 or 2008, I came across a marimba solo of hers called Taksim from Intermediate Masterworks for Marimba, which was compiled from a bunch of different composers who submitted works to be in this collection. And I just really loved the piece. And so I played it, and then I think I contacted her a little while later about it when I posted a YouTube video, and she sent me a complete collection of marimba work she'd done. And then years later, we ran into her at a saxophone conference that we were playing at in a bar, and just kind of hung out with her. And I don't know if we talked about getting a piece from her at the time, but that somehow her name was definitely on my list when we were talking about people to commission.
Cool.
So yeah, we eventually got to work with her, and um, about the piece itself, I mean, I didn't really know what to say about the music. I think she told us it was one of the hardest things she'd ever written, so it has that going for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Noah.
Oh, sorry. Well, I mean, in terms of the structure of the piece, it sort of goes back and forth between these measured sections where we're hocketing, and it doesn't sound like there's a really sense of measured time or pulse, but we're at least coordinated in the way we're feeling the rhythm together. And then there are these sections that are more free or more chaotic. And so it's this idea of going back and forth between chaos and structure in a way. And she incorporated improvised music into this too. Like, you know, some of my markings in my part say like Coleman Hawkins vibrato and mayhem in Stephen's part. And so there's this sort of, that's part of the juxtaposition, I think, between organization and chaos.
Cool. Let's check out a little bit of this piece. Cool. Yeah, what I really, among the many things I enjoy about this piece is the sort of the implied counterpoint she sets up with different timbres and registral things, and also like how you guys are sliding in and out of rhythmic unison and then filling each other in with these odd groupings, and it's sort of like I don't know, this like quirky dance aspect, at least to that section for me.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
yeah,
And the great part about collaborating with her is that she came to Cleveland and we had extensive workshopping to find those sounds and figure out like how to sort of piece them together, kind of similar to like how Alex Minchik and Eric Wubbels create what they would call like an alphabet of sounds. It's kind of similar to that. She wanted to find these sounds that she could have going throughout the piece. So it was fun to workshop and explore that with her.
That's cool. Is she what's her instrument?
Piano.
Oh, it's piano. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How many of the composers on the album are either sax players or percussionists, if any?
Dan Tramte was in a former life a percussionist. I don't think he plays so much anymore, but
Yeah.
And Aaron Rodgers is a saxophonist.
Right, of course, Erin. I mean, obviously, yeah. Okay, sweet. Let's talk about the next piece. So this is Hung Da Chin's Time Was Not Passing, inspired by Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, right? So there's like this sort of, at least overarching idea of a cyclical organization, but how that manifests itself is sort of a little bit ambiguous. But you guys want to talk about the piece as a whole or experience playing it?
yeah. So Hongda is actually a flutist. I guess he's as close as it gets to to a saxophonist aside from Erin. But one of the things I like about working with a lot of different composers, but I'm pretty confident this applies to Hongda, was that he'd never written for drum set, to my knowledge. And it's always interesting to hear people's interpretation of the drum set either as this thing of itself that has all these implications in rock and jazz and all that, or if they just kind of see it as a collection of percussion. And Hongda's piece was kind of interesting because it used all these, I think, different sections of the drum set as kind of unique voices. So there are a lot of passages where like wood blocks and cowbells are doing this very extensive stuff, and then drums and cymbals doing kind of heavier playing. And this kind of cyclical thing is on a large scale. There are a lot of sections of the piece that repeat and come back in different forms. Um, and also in a smaller way, a lot of Noah's melodies have this kind of repetitive, kind of cycling sound to them, also in the wood blocks and all that. So yeah, it kind of happens on every level of the piece, macro to micro.
Sweet. Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned this idea of, I mean, your guys' instruments, but also mine. I feel like I'm sort of relate to this conundrum of our it's like our weaknesses are also our strength. The associations are so strong with these iconic stylistic connections. And so it's interesting, the composer approaches electric guitar, for instance, or nylon string guitar. And it's like, how do you get away from the Spanish thing? Or how do you get away from the rock guitar thing? How do you get away from Clarence Clemens in the E Street Band, you know, like when you're writing for tenor sax? Or maybe you don't run away from it. Maybe you go right at it. But it's always interesting. It's like an elephant in the room that a composer has to negotiate in a certain way, one way or the other, which is maybe unfortunate, but you know, it's baked into people's expectations for our instruments in a way. Do you want to say something else about the excerpt, Noah, or should we just play it?
Not necessarily about the excerpt, but about the piece. I think also what's interesting about it is just, similar to what Stephen was saying, like Hongda incorporated the fact that Stephen has a double bass drum pedal, and so it has that kind of like hints toward metal at moments, but my part is highly microtonal, so it's like very contemporary classical sounding to me, but also, you know, has maybe Eastern elements. Like Hongda is Malaysian, so that kind of always, not that he always incorporates it, but I think that's sort of always there, and he loves microtonality.
Cool.
I think all of his saxophone music has microtones in it.
Nice.
So, and it was fun to collaborate with him pretty closely too. We went to Avaloq Farm with him for a whole week, and he had a draft ready to go, but we basically learned it in that week and tweaked it, and he made revisions and kind of tightened things up. So it was great to have that opportunity to hone the piece during that week.
Sweet. I'm curious, this is sort of a random off-topic question, but when you're playing microtones on sax, is that a balance between a fingering change and also an embouchure thing, or is it usually lean one way or the other?
Ideally, it's always fingering so that I don't have to adjust my embouchure. There are certain notes where you can't really do it without adjusting your embouchure, but you wouldn't be able to do it very controlled, in a controlled way quickly. So with Hongda's piece, the notes it's all fingerings because it goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah, cool. Okay, let's check out a little excerpt from this piece. Time was not passing, it was turning in a circle. Hongda Chin. Cool. Yeah, I think even just in the way that sort of certain motivic ideas are modularly moved around, it conjures a cyclical thing for me, just in that little excerpt. You want to say anything else about that one, or should we go on to the Wubbels?
We can go on.
Cool. So the next piece on the album is from the excellent composer Eric Wubbels, Axamer Folio. Am I saying that right, or Axamer?
Mm-hmm.
And this one's a sort of a modular piece that the organization and the order of various different sections would be different each time you play it, right?
Not each time
Oh, okay.
necessarily. I think it's more as a device to allow each performer or group of performers to put their own kind of personal stamp on it, because we commissioned it as part of a fairly large consortium. I think Eric was specifically thinking about all these people have different backgrounds and musical interests, and it kind of freed us up to create a unique piece of music for each of us. And
oh, cool.
we've played now, I think, three different,
Two, I think.
two or three.
Uh-huh.
We did a longer one and then a shorter one for a while, and this is closer at least to the first longer one we did. Yeah.
Cool. So you assemble a performance that organizes the piece into a certain trajectory, and then you each time you get up, you do that, unless you just sort of consciously decide to switch it up.
Yeah, and there are different rules, but they're loose, and so it's kind of like those create your own adventure books that are like turn to page 73 or go back to page whatever. It's kind of like that. And we would like run the ideas by Eric just to make sure that, you know, we weren't going against anything too severely, but generally it was more of finding a good pacing and a good mix of different types of modules, because some of them have improvisation, some of them are very like homophonic, where we're playing pretty tightly knit measured stuff together, and with him also we workshopped this like alphabet of sounds that he was going to use throughout the piece, so the cohesiveness kind of comes from having similar language through the whole piece, especially for the saxophone part, but there are times where I'm improvising because we selected some of those modules that have improvisation.
Cool. Yeah, it was fun to listen through and mostly be able to sort of identify what kind of notation was happening in a given section, but then there are a few that I really couldn't figure it out, and that's actually sort of the most interesting moments in a way. I mean, the whole piece is really interesting, but that sort of ambiguous land between not being able to tell whether or not something's improvised or through composed. So here, let's check out some of this cool piece. Sweet. That sort of the glitchy, almost like record skipping thing towards the end is something I really associate with Eric's music, but also actually with a lot of the Wedding guys. This way of taking a sort of repetitive module and then adjusting it and having it be off kilter, but then it sort of can't escape itself. The section we just listened to, I mean, the end, it seems like it's through composed, but what about the stuff before that? What's the notation like?
Those we're each playing separate modules layered on top of each other in the first part of that. I'll speak for my own. It is Um, I think the rhythm was dictated, but that's all it is for my part. There's a rhythm with text, and my job in that one is to kind of orchestrate it on the drum set. So I created the part from a single line rhythm, um, sort of based on a combination of things. I kind of started out crafting it based on interpreting the phonetics to be on drum set, and then it just kind of transformed um, along the way into just kind of whatever I felt like.
Does it have
Uh,
like contour, sort of like workers union style or something, or it's
I
more
haven't
rhythmic information?
I haven't looked at the original in a long time, but it is just a single. It's just a single line of rhythm, like you would see in a snare drum part or something
Oh,
like
cool.
that.
And then you're just orchestrating it. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
And then my part was a text-based improvisation, and it was so. First of all, the piece, all of the modules were named after villages in the Austrian Alps,
Uh-huh.
and so the one that I was playing is called Nader, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but it was just a page of statistics about that Austrian village that I was named after, and the only instructions were high pitched, articulate, skittish, and there might have been some other words to go by, but I was basically supposed to like play it the way I would be reading it silently. So
Ah,
I just tried to like inflect as if I was reading the words in that high voice and as fast as possible. Actually, that was one of the instructions. And so it has that kind of frantic
ah,
feeling. And the piece is dedicated to Anthony Braxton. He's one of the people it's dedicated to. So I think that was sort of a tribute to some Anthony
yeah,
Braxton there.
that's cool. It gets a sound in your ear. That's neat. Sweet. So let's check out the next piece on the album is from Erin Rogers, saxophonist and composer, who was also featured on a release we had 2 weeks ago from her really great quartet Hypercube. And this piece is called Fast Love, and we're going to hear the beginning minute or so. You guys want to set this one up, or should we just play it?
Just play it.
Just play
Yeah.
it. Here we go. Cool. That's it. The music does speak for itself. I mean, that you won't get any argument from me. Noah, you've collaborated with Erin before. Only Suono had a piece. What, My Manifesto, right? Or
No, hers was called Clamor. It was at the end. It was,
it was Chris Dietz's piece was
yeah.
Manifesto, right? But they're similar, like in the use of vocal stuff, right? Or like speaking.
Yeah, she had a lot more speaking in that. Well, that was part of our Saxo Voce project, so it was
Right. Oh,
intentionally had a lot of
right.
vocalization in it. But even in this, like I'm vocalizing at various times in her music.
Yeah.
She likes the like guttural sounds, and um, I don't know. It's very physical. I'll say that. Like playing Barry with all those air sounds, I felt like I was going to pass out all the time. So it was like always this like edgy thing for me to practice and play it and rehearse it. And so I don't know, it's just interesting the way it felt to play, and the piece is supposed to be about love, but really like it's just a weird
fast
balance
love.
of things.
It's not just any kind of love. It's fast. So maybe
exactly.
Yeah.
Supposed to make you lightheaded, I guess.
Yeah, right. No, that's cool. There's a certain kind of like frenetic collage thing that Erin often does in her music that is like super compelling. I don't know that this piece necessarily is like sort of the most extreme version of that, but I caught sort of hints of it. Stephen, do you want to add anything about this one, or you're good? We're good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Erin's amazing. We love her. So the last piece on the album, it is from Dan Tramte. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Tramte.
Tramte. Apologies. And it's called Grind, but it's not spelled like you would say that. And I'm not going to try to explain it. It's like, think about like the artist formerly known as Prince, and you'll have a sort of sense of what I'm talking about. And Dan was inspired by a particularly compelling part of the YouTube rabbit hole universe focused on videos about wind-up toys, which I feel like anybody can relate to, just spending hours and hours of late night time going down the wind-up toy YouTube black hole. So we're with you on that one, Dan. And you're actually, Stephen, you're playing in parts of this piece, you're playing some wind-up toys, right?
Yeah. Of the pieces that we recorded for this album, I think Dan's is definitely the most kind of interpreting the drum set as a more abstract thing, which is interesting because, like I said, he's a percussionist. But no cymbals at all, just playing drums. A lot of strange implements, rubbing styrofoam block across the drum heads, super ball mallets, using a plastic cup on a wooden board to get that kind of screaming, squeaky sound. And then a lot of wind-up toys, which kind of just generate white noise, which is sort of a theme of this piece. There's a lot of that happening in the electronics, which I'm also controlling, and Noah's part is also very noisy as well. But yeah, they just kind of walk across the drum heads.
What are like the sort of, what's the corporeal sort of character of these wind-up toys? I mean, are they animals? Are they little people?
So
I have one right here, actually.
Oh yeah, that's great. I was wondering if we had a problem. Oh,
this one didn't work. The chatter teeth. This one did not work very well because it would just fall over and not go anywhere.
Oh no. Okay.
So there were a few that were great. Steven, tell him which
yeah,
one's best.
I bought a bunch of them. I went to a toy store and kind of just bought everything they had and experimented to see what would work the best, mostly from a practical perspective because, like Noah said, the chatter teeth kind of flop over pretty easily. So the kinds of things that tended to work best were things with wheels because they couldn't fall over. So there's this little caterpillar that has a nice kind of droning sound to it.
Cool.
Yeah.
The monkey with cymbals was a good one too.
Oh, I would imagine that would be a really good one. And then you sort of actually don't have to do as much work then because he's sort of taking care of some of the.
Right.
I think there's a potential to sort of define a whole new performance practice here with the, which wind-up toys you get and like where they're available. You could, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, let's check out some of this very cool piece. Grind by Dan Tramte. I mean, I don't know if it was intentional on Dan's part, but there's definitely a lot of moments in that piece where I feel like he sort of sucked me into like a browser or sort of waiting for a YouTube video to load or something. Like there's the vibe is there. It's very cool. Well, this is great. It was fun to hear you guys talk about these pieces and learn a bit more about them. Do you want to add anything? You want to shout anybody out? Or I don't know. Anything else everyone should know about this cool album?
I think we got all the shout outs. Mark Bunce, all the
Mark Bunce,
composers, Isaac Klunk, artist.
Awesome.
I want to thank you, Dan and Neil, for being an awesome
Our pleasure.
label. Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys are awesome.
No, thanks for letting us, entrusting us with this work. It's really cool stuff. So, and thanks everybody for checking this out and sticking with us for 20 odd minutes. And we'll see you soon. Patchwork FCR255. Go check it out on Bandcamp and everywhere else you can grab music. All right, thanks again, guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.